Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're located. I'm Sillemann, and I'd like to welcome you to this ForNAV webinar called Introduction to ForNAV. So with me today, I have Mark Brummel, René Brummel, and Michael Nielsen. It's primarily René and myself who will do the presentation, and we'll have Mark and Michael ready for questions. And if you have any questions as we go along, please use the questions tool in GoToWebinar. Mark has promised to keep an eye on the tool, and if you believe it should be answered immediately, he will jump in. And if you believe it can wait till the end, we will do so. And then, of course, we will have a Q&A session at the very end of this webinar. The webinar will also be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow. We have another webinar tomorrow and we will, as we normally do, select the best one and make that available online. So with that, I like to get started just with a very few PowerPoints just to set the scene and give you a quick introduction to what ForNAV is all about. And then the rest of the session will be demos and showing products all the way through. So what is ForNAV all about? Basically, it's about three things. So we have our ForNAV converter, we have our ForNAV designer tool, and we have our set of standard reports. And probably some of you have heard about us, especially heard about the converter tool. That's where it kind of started out by converting reports from C-side. And I don't know the exact number because all of this is of course done by US partners, but we believe the number is way above 250,000 reports that has been converted from C-side. Today we can convert from Classic, so that's all the way from 2009 or earlier, and to any of the newer versions of Business Central, currently 15 and soon 16 coming up. And of course, we support both C-side and AL in that respect. And most recently with the converter, you're also able to actually convert all your C-side objects to AL extensions. And that part of our offering is actually free because that's a tool we started out building out for ourselves because we needed it, and we decided to share it with the community. We're not going to talk much more about the converter today. We are going to focus on the designer and the standard reports. And talking about the designer, there's a lot of very good things that we support with our designer tool. One of the very important ones is what we call the dynamic data set, which basically means that you have full access to all fields, to all captions in the tables you have selected. So you don't have to define fields as columns before you can start working with reports. You simply drag and drop them into your report, which of course we will show you very shortly. Another very important part of the ForNAV designer is our master section technology. Some people also refer to it as templates, which basically means that if you have reports that has similarities, and of course things like an invoice, a credit note are very good examples of that, where you have things that are more or less the same, 90-95%. Then you can use the master section of the template to have the things that are the same, and only do the things that are specific to a report for that specific report. Everything else is maintained in just one place in the template. Of course, you can build new reports. We also have support for things like barcodes, QR codes, custom fonts, and so on. And then some of what some people will call the good old things from C-side, like several headers and footers, like transport of subtotals and so on. All of that is also included in the designer tool. So to kind of summarize this, we have tried to take the best from several areas, some from the C-side reporting tool, some from RDLC, and some things that have just been invented by us. And of course, when we talk about working with extensions, we have done everything we can, and we continue to do so to really make things easy for you. So you can basically work with our designer tool, build new reports or modify existing reports, and you can do that with or without using Visual Studio Code. So you can do everything in the designer without touching Visual Studio Code, but if you want to, you can also upload the things to Visual Studio Code and work with them there as you want to. And we will also show an example in a few minutes on how to create a brand new report and even adding it to a page in Business Central from the ForNAV designer tool. And then our set of standard reports, which today represents a little over 80 reports in total. So this is all the documents, sales, purchase, services that are covered, a lot of statistics on customers and vendors. We have a very extensive set of label reports, both with and without barcodes. And of course, all of these reports are fully customizable, so you can use them as they are, or you can modify them to whatever specific needs customers have. And then specifically for North America, we also have the Czech report. These are just some examples of how our sales document reports look like. Basically, our design, we have tried to make it as simple as possible, so it's very easy to maintain and add new stuff versus having a very complicated design where you more often need to remove things that you don't need. Finally, I just want to make sure, I know I mentioned it briefly already, but we do support all of the scenarios that are available from Microsoft. So up till Business Central version 14, we support C-side and extensions, and of course from 15 and onwards, it's extension and AL only. And we also support it on the platforms where Microsoft delivers this, so on-prem or private cloud. And with extension also the Microsoft Service Cloud offering. So with that, I like to switch to actually look at the product. So let's do so by simply going to a Business Central session here. So basically what I have here is a standard Business Central. In this case, it's a US tenant, but of course it could be any of the tenants and languages that are offered by Microsoft. They are all supported by ForNAV. The only thing we did here is we installed the ForNAV extension from AppSource, and that's basically it. And then we ran the assisted setup, which is sort of replacing the report selections that are in Business Central. So whenever you print, for instance, a sales order, it will not be the standard report, but it will be the ForNAV report instead. I have my list of ForNAV reports, just to show you that the slide I showed was not just an exaggeration, but I actually have the full list of all the reports here, just to show you that they are here. When you have installed ForNAV, there's a basic setup page, and it really contains very, very few information. All of this is also covered by the assisted setup, but here you can actually change it. So we have a payment note here, says please pay, or whatever you want to say. And you can also refer to some legal conditions if you want to. Then you can add a logo. You can also add some watermarks. We'll come back to that. Now you might wonder why we have a logo here, because you already have a logo in the company information. The reason is that we support some additional picture formats compared to what Microsoft does out of the box. So here you can use PNG or PDF, which gives you a better resolution. And again, to some customers, that's very, very important. But in general, there's not much more to decide here on the setup. So let's jump right into a sales order and see how this works and looks like. So let me just go to my sales orders, and we can do a quick print of an order confirmation, and I can do a preview. And then I will see my my report here. As you can see, the logo here is laser sharp, no matter how much I zoom in on this, and you will recognize the design from previous. So far so good. Then I talked about the watermarks. On our website, we have a number of watermarks, both in A4 and in letter format. And you can of course take any of these watermarks and use them. But the good thing here is also that these watermarks are simply PDF files. So if you have a customer who has a specific need for a certain watermark or a picture he wants as a background, you simply create the watermark using, for instance, Word, save it as a PDF, and then you have your watermark. If you're happy with any of the standard watermarks that we provide, you can simply go back to the setup page where I was before. So let's just go back there, and you can add a watermark. And here you have both document and you have for list report. So let's just add one for the document. And I'm running A4, so we better take that. And we can take number 3. And then we can go back to the sales order, and we can print the confirmation again. Do a preview. And here we go now with the watermark. Again, this is a very basic way of making the documents look a bit nicer, but this is really something that at least some customers, they appreciate very much. But let's talk about how we can change this a little more than just adding a simple watermark like this. So like I mentioned, what I could do now is that I could actually go in and modify my sales order. But since we have already with the standard reports we deliver, we have taken advantage of this master section technology I talked about earlier. So all of our document reports are actually based on a number of templates, one for sales, one for purchase, and so on. So instead of modifying the sales order, I actually go to my setup again, and I say that I now want to modify the sales template. Out of the box, we provide these 6 templates, but you can basically build whatever many templates you want to. They are simply reports, so there's no real limitation in terms of how many templates you can have. If I open the templates, and then this time, instead of previewing it, I will actually say design. So I open the designer, and now instead of viewing the report, it will actually open the report in the ForNAV designer tool. I just have to go through some validation. Here we go. So this is the ForNAV designer, and let me just start out by giving you an overview of what we see here. So here in the left side, I have a number of standard controls, text box, picture box, and so on. And this is also where I have things like the barcode control, and I have a couple of basic chart or graphic controls. I also have my properties, and depending on whether I'm looking at a section or a specific field, you will see that the property grid here changes. So I only see the properties that are relevant depending on where I'm working right now. And up here above the properties, I have the whole data set available that I also talked about earlier. So not just these things that if some of you have worked with RDLC, you know you have to define these columns and so on to get access to the data set. But actually here you have full access to everything. So in this case, I have defined my header, which of course, you know, the sales order and sales invoice and so on is based on a header and a line. And here I have, as I mentioned, I have the all the captions, field groups and field lookup. Let me come back to that in a second. But then you can see here I have all the fields, and I can simply jump and say I need the number or the name or whatever, and then I can drag in this information. And then here at the top, I have a number of editing and alignment features. So of course, I have all the font features. I have alignment and layout, so we can have things positioned exactly the way we want them to. And of course, I have all the other features you would expect, like copy paste, undo, redo, and so on. So let's start out by making a very, and of course, well, so let me not forget that. Of course, here I have the report itself. So if I scroll down, you will see that this is very much what you see is what you get. So you get a very good overview here of how this report actually will look like. With the header, with the lines, we have some trans header, and we have a footer. This is partly something that René will come back to a little later in this webinar. But again, like I said, let's start out with something really basic. Let's just change the color here. And what you will notice here is that I can do bulk editing, so I can simply select a number of fields and I can change the color or the font or whatever I want to change here. Another example is if we go up here to the fields again. Let's just take the number, the order number or the invoice number, depending on which report it is. I can drag in the number, and of course then I get some grid lines that help me place this where I want it. And let's say that I want the sorry, let me just try that again. Let's say that I want this as a barcode. Then I can simply click the shift button, and then I can select that I want the number as a barcode. And that's really what it takes to get the number presented as a barcode. Nothing else, no fonts to be installed, no special things or anything. It's just that. Then of course you might ask, yeah, but which type of barcode is this? And here I have in my properties, I have a long list of, I would probably say, all the barcodes you can imagine, including the QR code that we talked about earlier. And for each of these barcodes, there are certain properties that are needed to make these barcodes work exactly the way they should. Now that we are here, I can also show you real quickly that I have the source expression. In this case, the header.number, because I simply drag and drop the number. But I can actually open this window, and then pops up a JavaScript engine where I can actually do more coding using JavaScript. I have all the functions here. I have the operators, and again, I have full access to all the fields. Now, I will not go deeper into this right now because I know René will come back to that a little later. So I don't want to take all the excitement away from that part of the presentation. I also mentioned that we have something we call field lookups. Some of you know that that some information in Business Central depends on relations to other tables. So, for instance, on the sales header, you have things like salesperson, payment conditions, and so on. They all represented by a code that then in another table shows the actual text. And of course, you want the actual text on your documents saying that this is current month plus 30 days and not CM30, because customers will not understand that. Now, when you have to do that today, you need to write a few lines of code to actually look up that information. But we did all of that for you beforehand. So I can simply select here the salesperson name, put it in here, and then I have the name of the salesperson. Now I have already done a couple of things modifying this report. Now, before I actually decide to save this report, I can at any point in time do a preview and see the result. So let's just do that real quickly here. And it just needs to connect to BC to get some relevant data. So here we go with a preview. And you will see that we now have the barcode, we have the name of the salesperson, Peter Sado, and we have this part of the document in red as I modified. So let me just go back to the designer again and say I'm happy with this. So I actually want to save it, and then I can save this document, and I can go back to my Business Central. And I can print a confirmation, preview, and hopefully we'll see that things have now changed accordingly. Here we go. So you will see that these changes are now implemented on the sales order, but not just on the sales order. If I print an invoice, if I print a credit note, an offer, whatever, other reports that are using this template, they will now already be modified without I have to do anything additional. So far so good. Let's switch to something completely different, because this was modifying the standard reports that we provide out of the box. But some of you might also be thinking, yeah, that's great, but what if I want to create a brand new report? So let's try that. Let's go back into the designer. One thing that maybe I should have shown it previously, but then let me do it now, is that in the settings here, you have the option to connect this to different types of NAV and Business Central. In this case, I'm running Business Central Cloud, but this is where you can see that you have all the other options for connecting to both C-side with OData or table export, or the extension part. But as you can see, I'm already connected to the Sandbox seminar, so I'm fine with that. So let's just go back and create a brand new report. When you create a new report, you have a number of templates available, and one of them is a simple list template. And in this case, as I'm working with BC Cloud, I of course want to do this as an AL extension. So I simply select that, and then the designer will generate the necessary things for me to work on this report. I just need to identify myself, and then we should have the template ready. Here we go. What we do is that we actually select the next available number, and we also give it a name. In this case, we give it the name ForNAV and the number, but let me just change that. So let me just change that to webinar. And I'm happy with the object number, so I don't want to change anything there. What I do want to change though is that when we create these templates, we always select the customer table for you, probably because that's the most used table. But in this case, I actually don't want to do this report on the customer. I want this to be a vendor report instead. So I simply go in and select another table, in this case the vendor, and now I'm running on the vendor table. Now I can go up and say I want to save this object on the server. And then I can actually start to build my report. successfully uploaded. That's great. So I selected the vendor, and as I mentioned earlier, this now means that I have full access to all the fields in that table already. So let's just select the number and the name and put them into the body section. Here we go. And in this case, I also want the captions. So let's just select the same two ones, the number and the name, and put them into the header like this. Very, very, very basic and simple report. Let's real quickly do a preview on that. Here we go. Preview. And then we have this very basic report with just the vendor name and the vendor number. So looking at this preview, there's a couple of things that I'm not too happy about. First of all, you can see up here that there's not enough space for the date because of the format that I selected. And I also like the heading to look a little bit nicer. So let's just go back and see if we can change any of that. This field was not big enough, so we simply drag it a bit. And then we can go in here and say that this should be, oops, I should have selected both. Sorry about that. Here we go. And then we can do a preview again. And see how it looks now, if we are more happy. Much better, much better. Not beautiful, but better. So I'm happy with this because I'm sure you got my point here in terms of how easy it is to actually build a report. Now, one thing I want to do before I actually save this report is that I like this report to be represented on a page. And of course, I can go into Visual Studio Code and I could do a page extension, but I can also use ForNAV to help me with that. Let me just find that property. Here we go, extend page. And then of course I need to tell Business Central which page I want this to be extended to. And I guess in this case, we will take the vendor list like this. And then I just want to change the usage category to reports. Yes, I'm happy with that. And then we can say save object on server. That also works. Good. So let's just jump back to Business Central. And let's go to the vendors. And go to the reports. And here we have the report for that webinar that I just did. Let me just do a real preview, quick preview. Here we go. That's the report we just created. So again, this was just an example of how easily you can build a new report. Of course, you can do a ton of other things to make this report look much nicer. But I hope you got the idea that you can do this entirely from the designer tool. And again, what we heard from partners is that this also means that report creation and report modification can move to or can be extended to other people in the organization that not necessarily have the full-blown Visual Studio Code experience. But we have many other opportunities with the designer, René. So let me hand over to you, and you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, Jan. We will just change screens.
Maybe while we do that, Mark, any questions so far?
Nope, nothing.
Okay,
Well, the floor is yours, René.
thank you very much, Jan. So far, we have seen some great stuff on editing and creating new reports. But what happens if we want to do something else? Let's dig a little deeper in what we can do with ForNAV. I'm actually on the same sandbox as Jan, so I am going to design the same sales template that Jan was working on. Which doesn't work. So let's try it again. Still doesn't work. I was hoping we could get through today without meeting Murphy, but
Yeah, so was
seems like we're not that lucky. So I need to sign into Business Central as well. So my ForNAV designer can connect to the sandbox and get all my table and field information. And obviously download my report layout. This takes a while. So what I want to talk to you about today is the more complicated sales lines, sales invoices, and what we can do with the sections in a ForNAV report. What you've seen so far is fairly simple sales order with just 4 lines. But what happens if our sales order moves over a single page? What will ForNAV do then? And what will it look like when I have different types of lines? So far, we've just seen item lines, but what happens if I have comment lines and general ledger lines? So if we dig a little bit deeper into my lines section of my report, you will notice that I have a number of sections, which is just the header and the body and the footer, which is great because they display the information we want to see. But we also see a trans header and a trans footer. And you will notice that it says continued and it shows the line amount. So if I go and preview this report, and just for this presentation, I have prepared a report with some more lines than the ones that Jan has shown us so far. So we have the report here. You will notice there's a ton of lines, and at the bottom of my page it says continued, and at the top of the next page it says continued with the totals amount. So that's the trans header and the trans footer in action. So that's easy enough. ForNAV calculates the totals for us, and we don't need to think about it or mess about with any coding. So that's great. But something else that is kind of bothering me about this invoice is we have the item lines, like the top line, which is great, looks great. But then we have a comment line, and it doesn't start at the left, and I kind of want to have it look differently. And I have some general ledger lines like the income services, and they don't have an item number, so I want them to start at the left as well. So basically what I want to do is create a different layout for anything that is not an item line. Fortunately, ForNAV can help us here without any AL coding. You'll notice we already have a lines body, and I'm going to add a new body right here. It adds it at the bottom here, and I am going to say this is a non-item body. And in this non-item body, I would like some information from the lines. So let's get the description. I would like the quantity. the unit price and the amount. So that should be enough for what I want to do. Just drag them into my report, and ForNAV will create a nice table for me. Let's make all this look a little bit nicer. There we go. Now let's preview it and see what happens. And you will notice that I have made a god-awful mess of my report because now I see every line twice. So how do I tell ForNAV to display the item lines on the item line part and the other lines on a different section? For this, what we can do is use the show output property of a section. Any given control in ForNAV has a show output property, and this show output property is by default set to true. So if I check this at this text box, you will notice it has a show output as well, again set to true. So if I want to show or hide an entire section, I need to work with the show output. And if I drill down into this, I get my JavaScript field again. So in order to show or hide this, I need some sort of JavaScript expression that gives me either a true or a false. And to determine which line I want to show, in which case I need to determine what my line type is. Now, Business Central has a number of line types. It has the comment, the general ledger, the item, etc. So if I want to display this line when my item type is item, I just do compare the field line type with the text item. And if I want to hide this section when I want to show this section when my line type is not an item, I do pretty much the opposite. I say my line type is not item. So let's preview this, see if I have made something less of a mess here. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So now I have my item lines, which show the number and the quantity, etc., and my other lines that are just the description and my quantity, unit price, and amounts. Now, these are description lines. Our comment lines, they don't have any amounts. So I would like to quickly hide the 0 values. This I can do without any JavaScript at all, because ForNAV just has a blank 0 property, which I can set to yes. Let's quickly preview this again. And you will notice that the comment lines now just have the text at the beginning and no zeros at the end. And my general ledger lines have the text at the beginning and then my quantity, unit price, and amount. So that's a quick way of displaying different types of information in the database in a different way. The second thing my customer would like me to do is to add the base unit of measure from the item line to my item lines in my invoice. Now, Jan has already told us that we have the field lookups. So ForNAV will actually get some information from related tables and show it in my make them available as fields, but the base unit of measure is not there. So I need to grab it from the item line. I don't really want to create a custom AL report out of this report. I really would like to do this just in my layout. Unfortunately, with ForNAV I can, because ForNAV lets us add data from different tables in our report. So if I go to the report properties and open the record collection, I can just add any table from the Business Central database. So I'm just going to select item, click OK. And wait a little while. And you will notice that in my dataset, I now have my item. And I have all the fields that are available in my item table. So let's just grab the base unit of measure and add it to my lines body in the unit of measure. Great thing about ForNAV is if you just drag a field onto an existing field, it will just update the field that's already there. So now I have my item base unit of measure. Then obviously I need to change my field caption as well, both in the header and the trans header. And let's preview the report and see what happens. So now my unit of measure has disappeared. This is not Murphy, this is expected behavior, because I have added the item table as a global variable in developer speak, but I have not nowhere told ForNAV what to do with the item table. I didn't tell it which record to get and what to do with it. So let me fix that right now. So there's a bunch of places where we can write JavaScript inside ForNAV. Jan has shown you the JavaScript editor with the text boxes. So this, for instance, is a little bit of JavaScript. So it just adds two variables together in a single string. We have seen the show output, where I simply use a bit of JavaScript to create either a true or a false. Let's dig a little bit deeper. In my line data item, I have an on after get record, which will be recognized as an expression by anybody who has created reports for Business Central. And if I drill down into this, I get a JavaScript window as well. And right here, I can do something a little more complicated. I can write an if statement. So this is just my basic JavaScript if statement syntax. And what I want to do is if line.type again is item, because I don't want to do this if the line type is not an item. I want to do an item.get with the line number as my variable. This looks like AL code, only ForNAV have added little bits of AL functionality to JavaScript. So in ForNAV JavaScript, I can actually get data from a database. So item.get line number, but only when my line type is item. Hit OK. And let's preview my report now. And you will notice that my base unit of measure now is back, and it is now gotten from the item table instead of from the line. But it now says PCS, and I'm not sure if my customers understand what PCS means. So instead of the just the base unit of measure, I'm going to use the base unit of measure description. So I don't need to mess about with getting adding the unit of measure table in my report and writing code to populate that. I just need to use the ForNAV lookup, and it now says piece, and this is the base unit of measure from the item card. So that's a great way of adding data from related tables in my ForNAV report. Let's go a little bit deeper still. I think we have some time to do something really cool. What happens? Let me just preview the report again. At the moment, my lines are all in a bit of a mess. I have my item lines and comment lines and general ledger lines all in a big mess, and what I would like to do is sort my my invoice, my report on the line type. So I want to have the comment lines at the top, and then the general ledger lines and the item lines at the bottom. And what I would like to do is add a total for every line in this, for every line type in the report. So I want to have the totals for my comments, which will be 0, the total for my general ledger lines, and the totals for my item lines. So the first thing I need to do is in my report, I need to sort my my data item on line type instead of line number. So let's do this. So I want to set my sorting on document number, then type, and then on line number. Now at the moment, whenever I change something that has to do with the data item, either add a data item or change the data item table, I need to save my report as a custom extension. In a future release, we're going to change that, so we can change the sorting of the data item, and we can change the data item itself, or even add data items without creating a custom extension. We're not quite there yet, so I am going to save this report as a custom extension. So to do that, I need to give it a name. So I give it object number 80,000, which I know is free in this particular sandbox. I give it an object name, and let me save this as an object on a server. Now ForNAV will create and upload an extension for me, which takes a little while. But my extension was successfully uploaded to Business Central. Let's preview this report now and see if my sorting has changed. Which I hope it has, because I've seen enough of Murphy for one day. Here we go, my sorting has now changed. I have my comment lines at the top, then I have my general ledger lines, and then I have my item lines, and all the way at the bottom I have my my totals. So that's great. So that's one a great way to get started. Now what I want to do is add the totals per group. To do that, ForNAV has provided us with some sections that are called group headers and group footers. So I'm going to quickly add those to my report. You will notice whenever I add a section to a ForNAV report, it automatically gets placed in a sensible and logical place. So when I have a group header and a group footer, and in the group header, I'm going to just add some fields. Let me grab my type caption just to show you what we're working on. and the type field. Then at the bottom, I would like to add the type again, so I know what my totals are. And I want to add the amount. So I can just add the amount. I don't need to mess about with calculating totals per page or anything. I can just add the amount, and ForNAV will do all the magic for me. And let's just improve this line a bit. Total, I can't even type today. Plus line type, so this will give me a string that I would like to add. Let's move this to the left a little bit, and there we go. Let's quickly preview this. And see what ForNAV has made for me right now. Nothing, still Murphy. Let's try it again. I might have missed something. No, Murphy is still upon us.
We can actually handle the Q&A while you try to fix it, because then it's not all the burning eyes on your fingers. We actually have a couple of questions that I can try to answer, and then maybe you can look at what's wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
I'll have a go at fixing whatever I've broken.
Yeah. So that basically means that now we are open for questions. Thanks, Jan and René, for the great presentations. I will first go through the first 4 questions that we had. I already answered the questions in text, but I think it makes sense to go over them anyway. The first question is by Thomas Hoffman. He says, "Hi, is it possible to have different layouts for page 1 and then the rest of the pages?" And the answer is yes. You can actually write show output against curreport.page number. And in case of sales invoices and sales orders, we of course reset the page number to 1 for each new document that you create. So if you create 100 invoices in one big PDF, you can still code against the curreport.page number. It resets itself for each document number. Then we have a question by Todd Scott. Is each report its own extension, or if I design 20 reports, do I have 20 extensions? So the answer here, Scott, is that we think the business case is as follows. The business case is that a power user or a consultant designs a report for the user. The user will tell them if they are happy or not, and if everything looks great. They do that in the sandbox. If the customer is happy and power user is happy, then they send the report to review to a developer. Developer opens the report in Visual Studio Code. He does a code review, or she checks the code into source code, and then if possible, they can combine multiple ForNAV reports into one extension and then ship that into production. We don't recommend changing reports in production. Of course, if you want to, you can, but you should not. It's not considered best practice. Then we have a question from another Thomas, Thomas Anderson. Hello, is it possible to add a second line to an existing with a comment or something similar? And the answer is yes, you can add as many sections as you want, and you can toggle visibility with any logic that returns true or false. Like René showed, you can code against basically anything in the Business Central database. We do recommend to keep the JavaScript a little bit simple, but you can make the JavaScript as complex as you want. Of course, if it gets too complicated, you can go to AL and add some code in AL and have that return to the report as a field. Then we have another question by Todd Scott. Can the field lookup handle translations based on a customer language? And the answer is again yes. You can. We will automatically read the translation from all the tables that Microsoft provides as translation tables. Although I do think that we currently have an issue with the extension that we have on AppSource, where somebody reported a bug that we fixed in vNext, but vNext will ship very soon. And in vNext, we also will introduce a new translation module. The new translation module will also allow you to do JavaScript, where you can say curfield.translate, and then you can translate something against data in your Business Central database. Very cool. It's too early to talk about it right now because we're putting the dots on the I's and crossing the T's, but that'll be in the next version of ForNAV.
So Mark, just to add to that, so currently the translation on field lookup works on-prem, but as you said, it doesn't work in the cloud version.
Yeah, but that's fixed in vNext, right?
Yeah, we didn't foresee that people needed it, but they do, so we added it to vNext. Cool.
Yeah. We do have 5 questions left. I don't know, René, if you have fixed the report, if you want to quickly show it, or if you want to continue.
Yes,
if you want to continue looking at the questions.
I have fixed my own error. It's I forgot to I forgot to fill a field, which I should have, which is kind of essential if we're working with group headers. And I noticed there is a question about can I create texts with language translations by Sarah, and I would like to answer that question as well by quickly demoing it.
Yeah, let's do that, and then we will probably run a little bit over time.
Yeah.
To answer all the questions. So we hope you guys can hang on, and otherwise, if we can see somebody has asked a question and they are offline, we will chase them via email. So René, the floor is yours.
Yes, I am back online. What I had forgotten to do in the line, there is an option called the group total fields, which you need to set to the field you want to group the totals by, which I had not done. So I have done that. And if I now preview my report, then you will notice that I have that I have got a new line with type is empty because it's a command line and the type is empty. Then I have the totals for type empty is 0, and then I have type general ledger account with totals for general ledger account, and then I have type item with the at the bottom totals for type item, and then my subtotal of the report. So that's what I should have added at the beginning, and I added it on my cheat sheet, which I created specifically for this presentation, which I didn't look at, which is silly of me. Now, quickly answering the text variables with translations, we have a label control, and in this label control, I can add multi-language captions. So let's start with English, which is TXT, and let's just add the Dutch translation, which is text, and you can add as many languages as you want.
So we do have a couple of licensing and training questions. Do you want to take those first, Jan?
Yeah.
Do you want me to ask you the question, like a proper moderator?
Well, more for the sake of other people.
So we have a question. What are the different licensing options, and what support and training do you give to partners?
Yeah. So starting with the pricing, when we run BC Cloud, the price is €7 per user per month, or 70 user per user per year. So basically, if you pay per year, you get 2 months for free. The on-prem pricing is that there are a few more options there, because we both have a perpetual and a subscription model. So I will send the price list, but it's also available on our website, fornav.com/pricing. On training and support, support is free unless you keep asking the same question 300 times. But we haven't seen that so far, so that's good. So support is free. Training, we actually offer that through René. So if you like to hear René's voice, that's the way to get trained. René is an independent consultant, so his services are payable. And what we do is we pay for the first 2 hours of training from René, which in many cases is sufficient, because a lot of developers like to get the introduction and then they like to play with things themselves. But René offers also a very extensive training if you want that.
Okay, so we have one last question. We do have one comment by David Singleton. He says, great job, great presentation, and it's good to see that you guys continue to add small improvements. So thanks, Dave, for the compliment. And then we have one last question from Tom Krakow. He says, is it still possible to use reference code units in the designer? So in the designer, you cannot declare a code unit as a variable. We could actually make that work, but that's a different topic. If you want to add a code unit, then you should add that to the dataset using Visual Studio Code. And then the variables that you want to add, you should add as data items. We do actually have a video on our YouTube channel called Design Patterns for ForNAV. And in that YouTube video, I actually recommend using argument tables. And argument tables actually also allow you to write code, but you can pass the code results from AL into your ForNAV reports using the fields from that argument tables. And you should declare that argument table as a temporary table. We do have a ton of examples of that in the report pack. And we do recommend that because it's a nice balance between the power user who will still be able to make a lot of changes without knowing anything about extensions, and then the power programmer who knows everything about AL. But in that case, the power programmer does not necessarily have to understand anything about ForNAV because all he is doing is populating the fields in the argument table. But that's definitely out of scope of today's webinar, which was an introduction to ForNAV. And with that, I think the questions are answered, unless somebody has a last minute brainwave or question. Of course, you can send them via email as well.
So while we give people a last chance to enter any questions, let me just do a little advertising for our next webinar, which will be March 25 and 26, called Working with Reports and AL Made Easy. And that's where we really will go deep on some of the things that has also been mentioned today, coming in the next version, called 5.1. But this is basically where we will show you entirely how you can work with the designer tool, building everything. We will also show the new translation tool that Michael briefly talked about. Of course, you can still like I said, you can still go berserk in Visual Studio Code if you want to, but we also want to show you that you can basically do everything without any AL code. So, Mark, any additional questions, or should we?
No, it's quiet.
Close it? Okay. So, thank you, René. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to everybody who spent a little over an hour with us. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you, and have a good day.